You're listening to Radio 1428 AM WBAK.
And today's news, Kennedy and Nixon make headlines yet again as television history was made last night during the first nationally televised presidential debate. Charges have been brought against Chester Wagner for the murder of Lillian Edding, Francis Murphy, and Mildred Lindquist at Starved Rock State Park. And discussion has begun as the city of Kewanee is seeking funds for a local post office. We will also check in with Papa Bear George Hallis to discuss last week's disappointing tie against the Los Angeles Rams and what the team is doing to ensure a win against the San Francisco 49ers this weekend. But before we get to the nuts and bolts from the establishment, let's check in with Miss Leslie Nessman for today's weather and Miss Andrea Travis live on the scene at the Fall Festival.
Thanks, Jonathan. It seems like the only thing not frightening about this time of year is the beautiful weather we are experiencing. Trick-or-treaters are certainly in for a treat as they head out to gather their goodies this evening. Though it looks like dusk will be upon us at 5:25, our little ghosts and goblins don't need to worry about needing too many layers as it's going to be an unseasonably warm 65 degrees.
Thanks, Leslie. So, Andrea, it sounds like the community is having a blast at the Fall Festival.
Our local volunteers certainly have outdone themselves this year, as the 1960 Fall Festival is the most spectacular to date. The sweet smell of cotton candy is in the air. The Ferris wheel operator has not gotten a break, and Save the Last Dance for Me is playing over the PA. New to the Fall Festival this year is a fundraiser for the Teachers Retirement Fund. School kids are lined up down the block, quarters in hand, waiting for the opportunity to toss a pie in their teacher's face. Once again, I am impressed with how creative the youngsters have gotten with their costumes. Dennis the Menace, Batgirl, and the Beatles seem to be the crowd favorites this year.
Right on, Andrea. And now a look into last night's presidential debate. Sorry, folks, we seem to be having some technical difficulties with our broadcast. Between Kennedy and Nixon.
Testing.
Testing. Finally, I have broken through. Sorry, Kewanee. Tonight you will not have your mundane news, sports, and gossip. Instead, I will provide you the truth. I don't have long. Secret societies at work in the city will use the FCC to triangulate my position. Operatives in the KPD will descend down upon me like a runaway locomotive. But I am getting ahead of myself. My job, my passion, is to cast the cleansing light of truth on the darkest corners of this community. There is evil at work here, demons and spirits and madmen, all working behind the scenes to empower the legacy families and bring about the end of the world. Wake up, Kewanee. When you sleep, they plan. When you watch TV, they scheme. And when you are sharing moments with your friends and family, they are implementing their dark machinations and summoning the evils of the past. This brings me to my noble pursuit, my divine quest. I will share with you the tales of the past so as to prepare you for the evils of the future. We begin tonight with a tale as old as Kewanee itself, with demons and spirits and madmen.
My name is Joseph Weber, a failed actor turned talent agent. I'm always looking for new faces, someone with real talent to pay my bills. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm a scumbag. It's this business. It chews you up and spits you out. If I can find a new hot star before someone else can, you better believe I'll do whatever it takes to sign the act. Unfortunately for me and my greed, I wish I'd never heard the name Alucard and the Great and Secret Show. My car had broken down and landed me in some podunk town 3 hours from Chicago, Kewanee, Illinois. I shacked up in a crummy room at a boarding house and decided to go for a walk. The carnival was in town for Hog Days, That's what the locals here call it. I chuckled to myself. I don't mean to sound like a snob, but the carnival is the lowest form of entertainment. I actually hate them, but what else was I going to do in this one-horse town?
Up win a prize, medal winner every time. How about you, boy?
I walked around for a while, unamused by all the lights and sounds. It was actually giving me a headache. I was about to leave when an odd-looking tent caught my eye. It was covered in black and red stripes, and looked out of place from all the other modern rides. Above the entrance was a brightly lit banner. It read a la carte, and the Great and Secret Show.
Come one, come all, to the greatest show on earth! His illusions will defy reality! You'll be mesmerized by his conjuring! Come inside and see a la carte and the Great and Secret Show!
I listened to the dwarf-sized man make his spiel. Then I gave the lady covered in snake tattoos my $3, and I pushed myself inside the crowded tent. When I got inside, several people had already taken their seats. My eyes strained to focus amongst the poor lighting and cigar smoke collecting inside the tent. The stage was painted blood red and had numerous props already in place. I didn't notice anything I hadn't already seen before in other 2-bit magician acts, so I nabbed a seat up front and waited for the show to start. After a while, I grew restless and began shuffling my shoe over some old peanut shells that had been discarded in the grass below my seat, when I noticed a younger woman approaching me. She was small and delicate-featured, pretty in a flawed, accessible way. I couldn't help but admire her low-cut dress as she shuffled by and took the seat next to mine.
Good evening.
Evening.
I lingered, hoping she would say something more, but she didn't. She sat forward, blankly staring at the stage. I looked around and then back at her. She stood out like a sore thumb.
Are you waiting for someone?
No.
Ah, you're a fan of magic.
No, sir. Not particularly.
I'm sorry, am I bothering you?
No, I'm just tired. Tired of all of this.
The circus? I thought I was the only stick in the mud around here.
I just wish I could leave.
I'm sorry, I don't follow.
I was intrigued by the mysterious woman next to me and wanted to inquire more, but we were interrupted when a la carte stepped out onto the stage. It was rather uneventful. Usually they would have some big unveiling or a curtain drop, but not for Mr. a la carte. He wore a dingy red suit and a long gray beard. On his head, a red and white striped top hat. I wondered if a bunny were inside gnawing at his head. After an uncomfortable amount of silence, he gargled out some words.
I am a la carte. Welcome to my great and secret show. For my first trick, the linking rings. Watch as I pass these solid rings through one another.
I sat and watched this frail old man perform a trick I was bored with in the 5th grade. What a joke. I was almost tempted to get up and leave. After his ring trick and some predictable card magic, the crowd felt the same as I and began to turn on the old man.
Yeah, show us some real magic!
Real magic? You want to see some real magic? Fine. I can see you people are more sophisticated. You want to see a real show.
The tent grew a slight chill as the old man looked crazy-eyed at the restless crowd. He clutched his deck of cards in hand, and then it happened. I can't explain what happened, but he was gone. The deck of cards fell to the ground, and a la carte had vanished right before our eyes. No curtains or veils. He simply disappeared in plain sight. I had never seen anyone perform such an act. I looked around, and everyone was as baffled as I was.
Ta-da!
His voice was startling as it echoed throughout the tent. We all turned to see him standing by the entrance door, a crazed smile on his face. The crowd burst into applause as he ran back onto the stage.
Was that to your liking? How about another timeless classic, folks? I shall saw someone in half. All I need is a volunteer from the audience. Yes.
Everyone in the tent lunged out of their seats, begging for a chance to join a la carte on stage.
How about you?
He glanced over the crowd and picked the woman sitting next to me. Her hand wasn't even raised. She stood slowly from her seat, as if she didn't want to. A la carte offered his hand and helped her onto the stage.
What's your name, madam?
Eve.
Eve? Such a beautiful name. Have you ever been sawed in half before, Eve?
No.
Of course not. Here, just lay back on this table.
Okay.
Now I know a crowd as worldly as you have all seen this gag before. You're thinking I'm gonna put her in a little box and she's gonna scrunch her feet up in one side while I pretend to cut her in half. Well, not tonight. I'm gonna do things a little differently. A special occasion for such a lovely crowd.
Alucard walked off stage and returned with a chainsaw. Immediately, the horde of men and women were uneased.
Let's see if you've seen this trick before.
The frail old man dangled the chainsaw over the young woman's torso. I gritted my teeth in anxiety. What was this supposed magician up to? Before I could answer that question, he brought the blade down into her stomach, spraying the audience in blood. The woman let out the most wretched scream I'd ever heard as the teeth poured through her body. The crowd gasped in horror as this woman was severed in half right before their very eyes. Her warm entrails spilled over the table and onto the floor. She was dead, and the audience became an unruly mob.
Stay where you are!
He held the chainsaw, pointing the bloody blade toward the crowd as they closed in on the stage.
My trick isn't over!
Alucard snatched up a long red veil and covered the woman's lifeless body. The crowd now wanted his blood. The man next to me was vomiting on the floor. For the first time, I felt fear crawl down my spine like a cold spider. Surreal. What was this lunatic going to do next? Someone had to get that chainsaw from him.
What's the magic words? Abracadabra!
He pulled the sheet from the woman. The audience silence was deafening. Every man and woman's mouth dropped. Eve sat up and looked around. The woman who everyone just saw gruesomely chopped in half was alive and staring confused at the crowd. She looked like she just woke up from surgery and was dazed from the anesthetic.
Well, say something to them.
You brought me back.
Yes, dear, smile. You were just part of one of the greatest illusions known to man. Now please, everyone, sit down. I assure you the lady is right as rain. Everyone, a round of applause for our assistant, yes.
Again, Alucard took the girl's hand and helped her off stage. The crowd looked at her in bewilderment, as if she had risen from the grave, and maybe she had. They all took turns looking her up and down as she fumbled back to her seat.
That was amazing. How did he cut you in half?
I don't know.
Look, lady, it's obvious you're in on the gag. You're a plant, right?
No, I don't know, Mr. Alucard.
You're not fooling me. I'm in show business myself. That trick, even though a bit morbid, could fetch a pretty penny.
Well, folks, I think you've all had enough of my tricks for one night. I think everyone will agree you've gotten your money's worth. So please, everyone, leave.
The crowd slowly dispersed after Alucard disappeared backstage. I turned to the girl and she too had snuck away. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck still standing. After the show, I found myself back outside, amongst the carnival goers. I looked at the oblivious families and children playing innocent games and riding the bright and flashy rides. I too felt like I was still on a ride, disoriented from Alucard's roller coaster of thrills and chills. I couldn't shake what I saw, but the greed in me knew I had to find him. I had to book him. He deserved the eyes of millions instead of the drunks and dregs of this tiny washed-up carnival. I went looking for Alucard. I made my way through the maze of painted trailers that were home to the carny people. Suddenly the door to one flew open and a woman stepped out, a scraggly beard covering her chin.
What do you want?
I'm looking for Alucard.
Alucard? Why?
I'm a talent agent from Chicago. I'd like to speak with him.
Agent?
Yes, Joseph Weber, Miss...
Beatrice. It's on the poster?
Yes, of course.
Why don't you go away? Go home. Agents are no good for us. Leave Alucard alone.
Why? What's the big deal with me seeing Alucard?
Magicians are a dime a dozen. You don't need him.
I disagree. I've never seen anything like his act. It was unreal.
Forget your curiosities and go home. Now.
The bearded lady had left me angry. It was none of her business anyway. Probably just jealous. I roamed through the trailers with my Zippo lighting the way. Finally, I found Alucard's trailer. A small aluminum antique set apart from the others. The trailer was completely dark. Alucard!
Who is it?
Joseph Weber. I'd like to speak with you.
What do you want?
I'm an agent. I'd like to see you.
Yes?
I just caught your show. It blew my mind.
Really?
My amateur tricks? I thought you were bored.
No, not at all. I'd like to do business with you. My office can get you on several networks, maybe even some nightclubs.
Nightclubs? I never play nightclubs.
Can I come in, explain my setup?
I don't mean to sound rude, sir, but I'm not interested in any offer you have to make.
I could get you $1,000 a week, maybe more with an act like yours.
I'm not interested in your money.
Please, can you tell me why you want to work for pennies at some 2-bit freak show when you could be making real money?
You don't want to know the answer to that, boy. Now I suggest you leave me alone.
You could be one of the most famous magicians of all time. Listen to me.
The highest form of vanity is a man's love for fame. Now good night, Mr. Weber.
I guess I should have forgotten all about Mr. Alucard and his great secret show. But I never take no for an answer. I knew there was money behind that strange man, lots of it, and I wasn't going to let someone else jump on that gravy train. There was also something about his reluctance that didn't add up. As I walked back toward the carnival and the bright lights, a figure stepped out from one of the darkened trailers.
So you had to see him.
Oh, you. Yeah, I saw him.
Are you satisfied?
Not at all.
Just more curious.
Well, yeah, I suppose so.
Only fools poke their noses into other people's business, and only fools get themselves and others into trouble.
Trouble? I only offered the man a good-paying job, unlike this poor excuse of a carnival. He could be one of the best.
Alucard cannot leave this carnival.
Why?
You don't know, and you don't need to know, Mr. Weber.
Know what?
Stop asking idiotic questions. Your curiosity can do a great deal of harm. Now, if you try to see Alucard again, you are a fool.
I went back to my room and drank myself to sleep. The next morning I couldn't stop thinking about Alucard's act. How did he cut that woman in half? I saw the blood shower the entire front row. I also couldn't stop thinking about the money. I took a cab to the carnival grounds on the edge of town. It was late in the evening as I came up to the dingy booths and tents. I made my way through the crowd and to the trailers where I hoped I wouldn't run into the bearded lady again. Unfortunately, I was spotted by another man. He appeared drunk as he approached me.
Agent man. Agent man. Agent man.
What?
I'm the knife thrower around here, and I can take the wings off a fly 30 yards.
Okay, excuse me, but I'm looking for someone.
Alucard?
Yes.
You should forget about him. I've got talent.
Listen, buddy, why don't you back up out of my face?
My sister's right. You are a piece of work.
Your sister?
Beatrice!
Oh, the bearded lady. What's her problem with me anyway? Why is she so protective of Alucard?
Us carnies stick together. We don't like outsiders sticking their nose in our business.
I just want to know what's going on here with Alucard.
Okay.
How does he perform such realistic tricks?
Now you hold on. I don't know nothing. Now you just... I gotta get back to practicing my knife throwing skills.
After that bizarre encounter, I found myself back at Alucard's trailer. The door to the trailer was unlocked and flung open when I knocked. He obviously wasn't there, so I decided to go in and snoop around. The inside was dim and musty. I left the door open to let what little sunlight the rest of the evening had to offer. At one end of the trailer was some kind of makeshift altar covered in candles and what I hoped were animal skulls. Next to it were shelves filled with unlabeled bottles and odd random ingredients inside them. One had spiders in it, another some kind of strange meat I didn't recognize. On his bookshelves were literature of the occult and spell books. What had I walked into? I was about to light a cigarette when I felt as if someone were watching me. I turned quickly with my back to the wall, but found no one. Still, I felt uneasy being there and wanted to get the hell out. I ran out of the trailer and bumped into Beatrice, the bearded lady.
What were you doing in here?
I was waiting for Alucard. None of your business.
What did I tell you?
Look, I don't like you or anyone else telling me what to do. If I want to see Alucard, it's none of your business.
I warned you one last time to leave here without seeing Alucard.
And I don't think you understand me. I'm not leaving here until I get what I want. I came here to sign Alucard, and all you've given me is a bunch of hogwash. Why can't I see Alucard?
I didn't want to have to tell you this, but you're so stubborn. Alucard's not well. He lost his mind many years ago. That doesn't disturb you?
It might, if I actually believed you.
What?
I don't think Alucard is insane. I think there's something else going on here. A man in my business meets every kind of person there is. The cheats, the phonies, the right guys, the bums.
So?
So? You developed an instinct about people. My instinct tells me Alucard is not insane. You have to try something better than that to scare me off.
You gotta stay away from Alucard. It's for your own good. Now I've warned you a second time.
Fine, Beatrice. I'll be on my way.
Goodbye, Mr. Weber. I hope we never meet again.
After I parted ways with Beatrice, I was determined to get to the bottom of this double talk about Alucard more than ever. This had become more important to me than just signing him. I wanted to know everything about him and his great and secret show. I sneaked my way over to the back of the tent where he had performed his act. No one was around, so I slipped in and found myself backstage amongst his props and costumes. Alucard was on stage this time, with the girl he had sawed in half from the night before. Obviously, she was a plant in the audience, in on his little illusion.
Can you please just kill me?
Maybe when I've grown bored of you. So what will it be tonight, Eve?
I don't care. Please just don't bring me back.
Oh, don't cry. Or maybe we'll have to go visit that daughter of yours. How old is she now? 44?
No. I'll do what you say.
My, how time flies when you're having fun.
I didn't understand what Eve was sobbing over, but I felt something was seriously wrong here. She had stepped away from Alucard. He gestured his hand in the air, and a group of swords resting at his feet began to levitate. He motioned the first one as it flew through the air, piercing Eve in the chest. She screamed and grabbed at it as blood poured from the wound. He motioned another sword, and this time the blade went through her mouth and out the back of her skull, silencing her screams. Alucard laughed in amusement as he penetrated this young girl's flesh with swords. I had never seen so much blood from such a petite girl. What kind of horrible trick was this? I was about to leave when I felt a heavy hand clench down on my shoulder and spin me around. Of course, it was the bearded lady. She looked angry and pushed me toward the front of the stage.
Look who was snooping around backstage.
Ah, Mr. Weber. You have a terrible knack for sticking your nose where it doesn't belong.
I only came back to change your mind about the job.
Well, I think you came back because you want to know more about me and my great and secret show.
Well, yes. I was only curious how you perform such realistic tricks.
I warned him to stay away.
It's okay. He was curious. And unfortunately, his curiosity will be his undoing.
Alucard had paced over to Eve and quickly removed the blade from her skull. She began screaming in pain.
You want to know how I perform such realistic tricks, huh?
Yes, I do.
Well, they're so realistic, Mr. Weber, because they are real.
What?
This carnival is over 100 years old, Mr. Weber, and I've been running it ever since we started taking admissions in 1873. Things were a lot different back in those days. People were a lot easier to entertain.
That's impossible. You can't be more than 60 years old.
It's impossible for you humans, but I've been around for centuries. Some men have known me as Mephistopheles, Nebris, Thoth, or even the devil himself. I only take the form of the man you know as Alucard.
I don't understand.
Alucard was a failed magician begging for coins by doing 2-bit magic tricks on the streets. He summoned me and made a deal for my knowledge. But every deal has a price, Mr. Weber.
What price?
Why, his soul, of course. Alucard died years ago, and I took his soul, as in the deal. But something fascinated me about you humans. Maybe it's the boredom of spending eternity in hell, but I decided to take over Alucard's body and remain here on Earth, feasting on your human fear. It's so delicious.
Why should I believe any of this? You're just teasing, trying to scare me off.
I have no reason to lie to you. Perhaps this will convince you.
He glared into my eyes, and I felt as if someone were gripping at my throat. I couldn't breathe. My body began lifting off the ground. I tried to grasp for air, but nothing came. His sideshow of freaks all watched as I struggled to catch my breath. His eyes were pitch black, and somehow I felt as if I were getting smaller. But that wasn't it at all. He was growing larger. His head touched the ceiling of the large tent, and this monstrous creature now towered over me. He no longer looked like a man at all, but a demon. I was paralyzed in his grip. I had never known such hell in my life. This creature was capable of evil I would never understand. I knew now everything he said was true. As if he could read my mind, once I made such realization, he let go, and I fell to the stage, to my knees coughing.
Poor Joseph Weber. Your greed has led you to me, just as it has many of men just like you. Now you too shall suffer until the stars burn out.
I made no deal with you.
No, but I can't let you go knowing what you know now. I'm afraid you are the newest member of my circus. Now get up. The next show starts in 15 minutes. You'll be my newest assistant.
Well, this is the end of my story, folks. I become just another freak in the cast of freaks in Alucard's show. Night after night, city after city, I'm cut in half, buried alive, or drowned for a sneering crowd who never will know the truth behind my horrible demise. Every night I die, and every night I'm brought back again. So if some night you find yourself strolling through the circus, eating your elephant ears and cotton candy, and you find yourself in front of Alucard's red and black tent, be sure to come in and catch his great and secret show.
Having heard this tale, my seekers of truth, take heed. Do not attend the carnival alone. Safety in numbers.
Kennedy emerged as the apparent winner from this first of 4 televised debates, partly owing to his greater ease before the camera than Nixon, who, unlike Kennedy, seemed nervous and declined to wear makeup. And on that note, let's check in with Leslie Nessman for today's weather. Leslie, what does Mother Nature have in store for us today?
Though we are experiencing wind gusts of up to 40 miles per hour this morning, they should subside by noon. So Kewanee is in for another gorgeous day. We will be breaking records with a high of 73 degrees. Enjoy it while you can, as this warm spell will not last long. A cold front will be moving in tonight. Looks like it's...
Leslie? Well, folks, it seems the wind was a bit more blusterous this morning than Leslie had anticipated. Stay tuned for the showtimes from our sponsor, Wanee Drive-In.
Village of the Damned starts this weekend at nightfall. In a small English village, everyone suddenly falls unconscious. When they awake, every woman of childbearing age is pregnant. The resulting children have the same strange blonde hair, eyes, and a strong connection to each other.
Testing. Once again, I have taken control of your radio. Don't be afraid, as all I deliver is truth. They call me a pirate, a criminal. But you, the faithful seekers of truth, know me for what I am. We begin tonight with a tale of a railroad town with an industrialized history. No railroad town exists that doesn't have ghosts. Kewanee is no exception. Listen closely to this tale, and always take a moment at a crossing. Look both ways regardless of whether there is a signal.
Though everyone knew about the crazy lady who lived across the tracks on 4th Street, very few people knew her story, knew the truth. Neighbors liked to talk, passers-by liked to stare, and when socialites were not gossiping about one another, they would speculate how someone so frail could be responsible for so much death and destruction. Oh, and let me tell you, the ladies in this town sure could spin a yarn, and they did not give a second thought about spreading an ounce of truth. They would sit out on their front porches, chatting over their morning coffee as their kids played in the yard. As a child, I remember sitting just out of view in the cool shade of my mom's hydrangea bush, hanging on every word said, marveling about how my mother and her friends knew so much about the murders, wondering why they did not help the police since they were so positive they knew how each crime happened. Looking back, I realized they were just a bunch of lonely women who enjoyed talking about anything remotely scandalous to break up the monotony of their lackluster lives. Though, it did not stop with the front porch gossip. The stories of the crazy lady were told at sleepovers, on night hikes, and around a campfire. As far as everyone was concerned, she was guilty, but no one was sure how she managed to evade the law. I crossed paths with crazy old Esther one chilly night in September. Normally, I would have been more aware of my surroundings, nervous about walking home alone after the party, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying the conversation between Connor and I, the way he intently listened to everything I had to say, his charming laugh, the way he gently brushed my hair out of my face. I still couldn't believe he chose me, or that we were getting married in 4 short weeks. If I were not caught up in my thoughts, I would have seen Esther pacing by the tracks. I would have heard her mumbling under her breath about Mark and Clay. I would have realized that she saw me coming around the corner. Looking back, I would not change the events as they unfolded that fall evening all those years ago. After all, you know what they say about hindsight.
All inbound and outbound traffic was rerouted this morning as local law enforcement attempted, once again, to cover up the circumstances behind another bizarre incident involving a single vehicle and what authorities are claiming to be a train at the Tremont Street crossing. The victim's identity is being withheld pending notification of the family.
Okay, I'm awake.
For those of you who have missed our updates and are seeking the truth, there seems to be another in the series of accidents that stem back to the 1930s. As with previous incidents, this crash involves a single fatality. After some digging, I have discovered we once again have a female victim in her early 20s. Oddly enough, as with the previous 11 victims, she too was less than a month away from her wedding day. Despite the lack of evidence concerning fuel residue or debris, the authorities are adamant that the collision occurred between a vehicle and a train. Insiders say that as with the previous 11 occurrences, there was no train to be accounted for. The authorities claim it is a coincidence, but how can they deny the strange similarities that link all these events together? Though many of the houses on 4th Street are now empty, the few residents that remain near the Tremont Street crossing claim to have heard and felt a train go by this morning in the early hours. 12 mysterious deaths since 1930, all occurring at the Tremont Street crossing, and we have yet to have an eyewitness. Until now. This is the first time a witness to one of these tragic deaths has stepped forward to provide details. Although it seems the police have dismissed her testimonies as the ranting of a crazy old woman, we believe that she may hold the key to solving this mystery. 84-year-old Esther Platt claims she was sitting on her back porch when she saw a black train appear out of nowhere and slam into the car. Platt states the only light she saw out of her kitchen window was a bright, eerie light coming from a locomotive. She stepped outside to get a closer look and saw what seemed to be an engineer hanging out of the locomotive window as they barreled down the tracks. What makes this situation even more peculiar is the few blocks down the street at the Grove Street crossing, no one heard a train, nor did they hear the squeal of brakes or the painful scream of the train ripping through the metal frame of a car. Sounds one would expect to reverberate through the town on a silent morning. Granted, one can speculate the validity of Platt's claims, though you cannot argue with the fact it would be impossible for a car to endure that extent of damage without another vehicle of some sort on site. But a train appearing out of thin air on a clear morning, and only those by the Tremont Street crossing could hear the destruction as it occurred? Despite the fact that authorities have dismissed the validity of Esther's account of this morning, I think we need to delve a bit more into the mystery. I have decided to do a bit of investigation and talk with Esther about the occurrences of this morning and see if she can shed a bit of light on the subject. Is this Mrs. Platt?
Uh-huh.
Good morning, Mrs. Platt. This is Mike with Mike in the Morning on WKEI. I was wondering if you could share a bit of insight on the most recent and mysterious fatal crash on the Railroad Street crossing at North Tremont Street.
It's Esther. Don't try to butter me up with formalities.
Sorry, Esther.
So you want to know what I saw this morning, huh? Not sure if I should waste my time. I don't think you'll believe me, just like the police. I was cast aside like a lunatic. I know what I saw, and this was not the first time I saw it either. Just because my account does not line up with what the narrow-minded authorities believe could happen does not mean I'm senile or crazy. And by the way, I'm 88, not 84.
Well, no, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Oh, stop your backtracking. There is no need for it. It does not matter. Before you know it, they will be investigating the 13th death, and hopefully at that time, this nightmare will come to an end.
You have a captive audience, Esther, that desires to know the truth.
What people don't seem to understand is that there is something far more sinister going on than what meets the eye.
Do you care to elaborate?
I've been around a long time, and when you've been around a long time, you see a lot of things. You know a lot of folks. You've got a lot of stories. For you to understand what has been going on here all these years, you have to go back a ways.
Esther, this is a lot to wrap my mind around. You are saying you know about the other incidents as well?
Do you want to get to the bottom of this? If so, you need to stop jabbering on with your filler and let me share what I have to say before he tries to stop me.
Wait, who is he?
Well, to understand what I've seen, you have to first understand what I know.
What you know?
Ever heard of Clay Strickland?
Nope. Wait, Clay Strickland? Wasn't that the guy who died along with his fiancée back in the early 1930s? You know, I do remember. They had been hit by a train bound for Kewanee from Princeton. Kind of an unsolved case there as well. But they were on foot. I think their car was parked near an old junkyard. Cold case, if I remember correctly.
So you have heard of him. Clay was taking a walk on the tracks with his fiancée and his best friend, Mark Olson. One of those things teenagers used to do. Smoke a bit, take a nip, and enjoy the freedom of a cool summer night. There was an intriguing danger of walking on the tracks. Those damn fools just loved to tempt fate.
I did not realize Mark and Clay were close. I remember Mark when I was a kid. He and his parents lived down the street from us. Mark delivered our paper until
he took his own life. But let's go back to that August night in 32 by Princeton. Mark and Clay did everything together growing up, just like brothers. They were competitive, came to blows pretty often, but always seemed to have one another's back. When Joy moved to town their sophomore year, both boys were smitten. Joy seemed to like capturing the attention of both Mark and Clay. I do not like how she toyed with their emotions like that. She dated Mark for a few months, and then she unexpectedly broke it off. Mark was heartbroken. Then Joy turned and went with Clay. Mark was the looker, but Clay was funnier and wilder. Somehow those two boys stayed friends. It was hard on Mark, and he never got over Joy. That's why he killed her and Clay.
Now, Esther, I remember Mark. He was a good kid, and these are some pretty serious allegations. And we have already discussed how that case was never solved.
Well, during the investigation, they never talked to me. Of course, I wouldn't have told them anything anyway.
Esther, how can you be so sure? These kids would have been quite a bit younger than you. It's not like you would have been in the same social circle.
One story at a time. Mark never got over Joy, but never let on to Clay how much it bothered him. Shortly after graduation, Clay proposed to Joy. She said yes. They planned on getting married the next year. Desperate to convey his emotions, Mark made a last-ditch attempt to win her back shortly before the wedding. He snuck over to her house just a few days before the whole ordeal went down and tried to convince Joy to run away with him and get married. She simply shook her head and closed the door in his face. That next Friday night, Mark picked up a bottle and some cigarettes and swung by Clay's place for a night on the town. To his surprise, Joy was there also. Joy and Clay usually went out on Saturdays, not Fridays. Mark tried to make it clear to Joy that he did not want her around, but she was never one to take a hint, so she left with them. Mark said he drank most of the whiskey that night. He could not shake her rejection, kept playing over in his mind, and when a train was barreling down the tracks, he pushed Clay in front of it. Joy tried to help him, but it was too late. I guess the police never really considered Mark a suspect because of how close he and Clay were. Mark told them Clay and Joy were fighting, and Clay was being his usual wild self. Mark was so broken up afterwards, the booze helped dull the pain. About a year later, Mark told me all this one evening when he came to collect for my paper subscription. He was working for the Star Courier at that time, and I asked him to come in for some lemonade, with it being such a hot day and all. I told him how sorry I was about Clay, and before I knew it, all this was pouring out of him. Guess he just had to tell somebody, and I seemed like somebody he could trust.
Wow. I'm stunned. So you became friends?
Nope. We never spoke again. It must have been a couple months later when he stepped in front of a train at the Tremont Crossing. What a sight that must have been. It's always made me wonder.
Wonder what?
If Clay got him.
Esther, I have so many questions. You mentioned that you knew about the other deaths. Are you insinuating that Clay has come back from the dead seeking his revenge? He and Joy were a month out from their wedding day. They were in their early 20s. This certainly links every one of the 12 deaths together. Esther? Esther?
Okay, Mom, I'm going to head off for work. Remember, I will not be home until late tonight. Connor and I will be going to a party at the Moriarty's.
Okay, honey, have a good day at work. Be safe.
I will, Mother.
The fool! I finally come forward and no one believes me. It is going to happen again. I feel it in the air, the energy. I have to do something. I should have done something sooner. No one will help me. No one cares. Crazy old Esther by the tracks. I know what is said. I notice the glances. I feel the weight of their judgment. Well, it ends tonight. Be vigilant, Esther. You can do this. You can put an end to this nightmare. Girl, what are you doing?
Nothing, ma'am. I'm on my way home. I was just with some friends.
Isn't your name Laura? Aren't you with that Connor boy?
Yes, ma'am. He's my fiancé.
You fool! Get away from here. Run! Go! Get out of here while you can. Go home, girl. Don't come around here again, you hear me? Don't come around here anymore.
She was crazed. Her eyes were wild, flitting about as if she were looking for something or someone. The pale moonlight reflected off her skin, casting an eerie glow about her face that chilled me. She had started mumbling again.
No, Mark, no one believes me. You need to go now. He is coming. I can feel it.
Frantically, Esther scrambled onto the tracks. She craned her neck to the east in what seemed to be a desperate attempt to look for something. What are you doing?
Girl, go home. Go home now.
She moved closer to me in a ghostly drift. I didn't know what to do. She needed help. Does she have a family? What would happen if I left her here? Should I call the police? Instead, I did nothing. As terrified as I was, I couldn't leave her side. Then, I felt the ground rumbling beneath my feet, and a cold shiver prickled down my spine. What is that?
Run, girl, run, Laura!
But I couldn't. I was stunned by fear. Coming down the track was a locomotive. I couldn't see it, but I could hear the engine screaming angrily as it barreled down the tracks at full speed. Now Esther was pulling at me, frantically trying to make me move.
Run far away!
Why? What's happening?
Run!
I saw it then, a huge locomotive coming down the tracks from the east. A shiny black iron horse with a plume of black smoke billowing out the stack. A man was leaning out the side, his deathly gaze focused right out.
No, no, no!
I was rooted in place. My feet had turned to stone and I couldn't move. I could only just shut my eyes and pray. I was shoved to the ground with a force I didn't know the frail woman possessed. In a split second, the noise was deafening. And then, silence. I was alone. No train. No Esther. Esther? Esther! Esther's bloody body lay mangled next to the track about 10 feet away. I ran and fell to her side. As she took her last breaths, she whispered,
Clay. Done. 13.
That's the last I remember of that night. Connor tells me I fainted and I was found next to Esther's lifeless body. That was 20 years ago, the night a crazy old woman saved me from being number 13. They raised Esther's house so no one else could live there. Connor and I live with our family near the tracks in our hometown. No one has spoken of the ghost train since that night. I don't think often about the terror I felt, but last night, our daughter, Esther Joy, brought home her boyfriend, Mark.
Don't believe for a second that the Tremont Crossing is the only dangerous place. This spectral locomotive is not picky. At night, when you lie awake with an uncomfortable feeling in the back of your mind and the hairs standing up on your arms, hold your breath and listen. Listen for the sound of the train as it passes, and pray that it stays on the tracks.
And we're back. Thanks for your patience, folks. And who better than our very own Andrea Travis to give us the scoop on these new dance crazes?
The twist, the mashed potato, the hully gully, and the map.
Testing. Testing. Once again, I have taken control of your radio. Don't be afraid, as all I deliver is truth. Just because something is weird and hard to explain doesn't make it less real. I have a treat for you today, seekers of truth. Speaking of the weird, the terrifying, and the unexplained, tonight I'm joined by a man who has uncovered a truly shocking tale from our local history. One that has been forgotten by time, but one that will shake you to your core. Allow me to introduce Mr. Leonard Applebottom.
Mom, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm a big fan of your work, Mr. I don't know your name, but it's...
My name is not important.
Oh, it's great to finally meet you. I admire you for having the backbone to stick your neck out and get the truth.
I appreciate that. My truth seekers know that I'll do anything to blow the lid off the lies, the cover-ups surrounding our community. So, Leonard, tell us what you've got here.
Well, it's a book. An old one, in fact.
A book?
Yes. One written in E.E. Baker's own hand.
E.E. Baker, the millionaire industrialist, the former president of the Kewanee Boiler Company, and founder of the Kewanee Park District.
Yes, the very same.
So, what makes this book so special?
Well, as you may or may not know, Mr. Baker once owned a hotel that sat on the site of the current Baker Park. This book is his account of all the strange events and unexplained phenomenon experienced there. Well, some of the events were witnessed by Mr. Baker himself, while other stories were relayed to him by his guests and the hotel staff.
Now, Leonard, how are you to be sure this book is legitimate? How do we know it's actually Baker's handwriting?
Well, yes, it is the real deal. The Kewanee Historical Society had a handwriting expert compare it to other E.E. Baker documents in their collection. The results were conclusive. Baker wrote this. Of course, they wanted to get their grubby paws on my book for their collection and their research, but I wouldn't let it out of my sight.
I have to ask, how did you come across this book?
Well, I guess you could say I'm a collector of things. If you've had a garage sale, you've probably seen me rooting around through your old records and baseball cards and things, but one day I heard a listing on the trading post for a big box of junk. The seller wanted $3 for it, but wouldn't tell me what was inside. He just said it was an old fruit crate that he found in the basement of the house he just moved into. So I told him my top price for old fruit crates full of junk, sight unseen, was 25 cents. You see, you gotta haggle with these people.
Yes, but what about the book, Leonard?
When I got home and opened the crate, I thought about reporting him to the Better Business Bureau. Inside that box was just a bunch of junk.
But you did agree to buy the box.
Well, you see, there's junk, and then there's junk. A leaky Magic 8-ball, a 1953 Atkinson phone book, an old peanut butter jar full of rusty screws.
But the Baker book.
Oh, yes. Under all that junk was this Baker book. I put on a pot of hot coffee, and I read it from cover to cover. I couldn't sleep a wink all night.
And how are we to believe that you're not just some kook?
What's that?
Nothing. Nothing. Now, Leonard, you said you'd like to share with my listeners one of the stories from this book.
Oh, yes, sir. Well, there are so many strange and terrifying stories. All things that really happened right here in Kewanee. But the story I'm going to share with you all tonight is the bone-chilling story of a visitor to our town, a Miss Lucy Meadow.
I'm sure we can't wait. Okay, Leonard, tell your tale.
The tale of Lucy Meadows. It was on a cold and rainy October night in 1893 that I first visited
the city of Kewanee. I had traveled by train from Chicago, searching for my dear sister who had vanished.
This stop is Kewanee. Please watch your step as you exit the train.
Excuse me. Excuse me. This is my stop, sir. Could you please hand me my bag? Thank you kindly. Ah, my boot! Good Lord.
Haha, you better watch it, miss. You're in the hog capital now.
Thanks for the update, pal.
Look, ma'am, I'm just having a little fun with you.
I could really use a drink right now. Don't get any ideas.
No, ma'am. My wife of 37 years would have my hide if she heard I was out gallivanting around town with a pretty young girl like you. You are totally my type, though.
Ugh.
Look, ma'am, maybe we're getting off on the wrong foot here. You've probably traveled far, so why don't you get yourself something to eat, and more importantly, that drink? There's a new Pabst Blue Ribbon Tavern right across the tracks. In fact, you can see it from here.
Look, thanks. I meant no disrespect.
None taken, ma'am.
It's Lucy.
Nice to meet you, Lucy. The name's Enos. It rhymes with penis.
Got it. Thanks, Enos rhymes with penis. You have a good night. The darkness surrounding me, I crossed the railroad tracks and followed the mud path that led up to the tavern. As I walked, I felt a cold, tingling sensation running down my spine. It was the strangest feeling. The feeling that I was being watched, or that I wasn't alone, somehow. But I couldn't worry about that now. I had to concentrate. I needed to unravel the mystery surrounding my sister's disappearance, and I figured this tavern was a good place to start. Bartender, can I get a gin and tonic, please?
Hey, you're back.
Excuse me?
You're back. I was hoping to see you again.
I'm sorry, but you must be mistaken. Wait, you're sure you've met me before?
Well, sure, just last week. Any luck getting that meeting?
You must have me confused with my twin sister. Clara? Yes. In fact, she's the reason I'm here.
Ah, so she's meeting you here.
She's not. I haven't heard from her in over a week. The police say she's disappeared without a trace. Please, I'm going to need that drink now.
I'm so sorry. I had no idea. My name's Lester. Besides the drink, what can I do to help?
Thank you, Lester. I'm Lucy. If you can tell me anything at all that you two might have discussed, it would be a great help. All I know is she came here to pursue some business opportunity, but she was very hush-hush about it. She said she wanted it to be a surprise, and if this worked out, we'd never have to worry about our finances again. You see, we don't come from much.
I see. Well, I have to admit, when your sister walked through those double doors, I was immediately taken. I tried to work the old Lester charm. The blonde hair and blue eyes usually do the trick, but it got me nowhere with her.
Lester, please.
My point is, she was so serious, so focused. I tried to break the ice by offering one of our 1-cent Pabst Blue Ribbon drafts, but she was intent on studying her pile of papers. All kinds of notes, mechanical diagrams. It was all Greek to me. But you see, we don't get many women like her in here. I was intrigued.
My sister is an engineer, a quite good one, in fact. But she must have talked to you at some point. You mentioned a meeting?
Well, I told her I could tell that she had a lot on her mind, and maybe it would help relax her if she'd just have a drink with me. She reluctantly agreed, and eventually confided in me that she was in town to meet Mr. E.E. Baker. Since he didn't reply to any of her letters, she was planning on just dropping in on him. She refused to tell me the purpose of her meeting, though.
So who is this Baker fellow, and where can I find him? He might be the last one to have seen my sister.
He's the most powerful man in Kewanee. He's a millionaire several times over, and is the president of the Kewanee Boiler Company. I told Clara she'd never get past his guards at the boiler shop, but her best shot at a meeting with Baker would be at his newly completed masterpiece, the Baker Hotel.
He runs a huge company and a hotel. How much money does one man need? If I had that kind of money, I'd retire and take up a hobby like golf.
I guess some people can never have enough, or maybe they just need to find new ways to spend it. The hotel is very popular with travelers, though. It's the only 5-star hotel between Chicago and Denver. Baker has been spending most of his time there since the grand opening to oversee things.
What do you mean?
Look, in my line of business, you hear things. Most of the time they're untrue, but after you've heard something several times, you start to believe it.
Lester, what on earth are you trying to say?
Please, keep your voice down. I'm saying I've heard of incidents, unexplained occurrences at the hotel since it's open.
And you sent my sister there? What were you thinking?
Please, I was just trying to help. I didn't know she'd turn up missing. She wanted that meeting more than anything, and she was so intent on tracking down Mr. Baker, I'm sure she would have ended up there eventually.
You're probably right about that. Look, I'm sorry. You've been a great help, Lester. Let me pay for my drink and I'll be on my way.
Don't worry about it. It's on the house. Good luck finding Clara, and if you go to the hotel, just please be careful.
I hired a carriage to take me to the edge of town where the Baker Hotel was located. As we traveled over the rough cobblestone, the carriage driver pointed out the dim lights of gas lamps on the tiny little shacks lining the streets. He said these shacks belonged to factory workers, mostly immigrants, who had come here looking for good-paying jobs. I could smell the smoke from their fires, some cooking, some just to stay warm. Recently, the weather had turned cold, and a large, nearly full yellow harvest moon hung in the sky as we reached the iron gates of the Baker property. It was our only illumination as we passed through and continued into the darkness. The road curved, then went down one hill and up another as we rode deeper and deeper into the woods. The driver assured me that he knew where he was going and the hotel was just up ahead, but I had my doubts. At the top of the next hill, I got my first glimpse. Even at a distance, I was amazed at the white gleaming gem in the middle of the darkness. The Baker Hotel was the most beautiful building I'd ever seen, and as we got closer, its magnificence became more striking. Illuminated by bright electric light like I'd never seen before, this white palace had pillars standing several stories high, beautiful gardens and fountains on the front lawn, and a large ornate golden red coat of arms hanging above the door. The short drive from the main road to the entryway was lined with pumpkins, stacked 3 or 4 high. I had forgotten that tomorrow was Halloween, but I had to remind myself that I wasn't here for a holiday or for the spectacle of this hotel. My goal was to find my sister, and I had a feeling this place held the secret.
Miss Meadows, you're back. We've been worried sick about you.
Yeah, hi. I've been getting a lot of that lately. I'm actually Lucy Meadows. Clara's my twin sister.
I'm sorry, Miss Meadows. I didn't realize. Since your sister's disappearance, we've been praying for her safe return.
I appreciate that, and I do need a room, but I don't know how long I'll be staying.
We've actually been holding your sister's room, at Mr. Baker's request. I don't see why you can't stay there until she returns. All of her belongings are in the room as well, untouched, of course.
That would actually be very helpful. I've been trying to retrace my sister's footsteps, and I know she came here looking to meet Mr. Baker. Do you know where I might find him?
Well, he usually enjoys breakfast in our dining hall at 7 a.m. As a hotel guest, you're invited to join us. We'll be serving hard-boiled eggs, homemade tomato slices with dry seed and leek jam, and your choice of German muffin.
Will you have coffee? I'll be having coffee.
Oh, I almost forgot to mention. Tomorrow night is the All Hallows Eve Masquerade in the Grand Ballroom. I hope you will join us. It will be great fun. The theme this year is Plague on the Prairie.
Thank you. I'd really like to head up to my room now. It's very late.
Yes, of course. You must be exhausted. Here's your key. You're in room 518. The elevator is just across the main hall. If you should need anything else, there's a bellman stationed at the end of the hallway on your floor. Good night, Miss Meadows.
Good night. As I walked across the marble floor of the lobby, the sound of my boots echoed in the vast vaulted ceiling overhead. Although the hotel was designed in a neoclassical style, much of the decor had a wildlife or prairie theme. Instead of the usual religious or historical subjects, the vaulted ceiling was instead painted with large figures of deer, raccoons, coyotes, cows, and of course hogs. As I made my way towards the elevator, I caught a familiar scent in the air, a rose-scented perfume, the same scent that my sister wore. I had stopped and looked around, but nobody was there. Was she just here? Had I just missed her? I then felt a warm breeze on the back of my neck, like someone lightly blowing, making the hairs on my neck stand straight up. I again spun around and saw no one. It was then I heard the words whispered in my ear.
Go back! Go back!
It was Clara. It was her voice. Without a doubt, it was Clara. But when I turned around, nobody was there. There was a maid holding the elevator about 10 yards from me. You there. Did you see that? Did you see someone?
Sorry, miss?
Did you see someone come up behind me?
Just now? No, ma'am. I saw you walking over from the front desk, so I just figured I'd hold the elevator for you. There was no one behind you.
You're sure? You saw no one else in the lobby?
No, ma'am. You're the first person I've seen in the lobby since, I guess it's just about a minute past midnight now. Since about 11:30, I'd say. Are you okay?
Yes, of course. Just take me to the 5th floor, please. It's been a long day. I was so tired when I arrived at my room. I quickly changed into my night clothes and got into bed. Barely pausing to admire the exquisite furnishings, I was asleep the moment my head hit the pillow. Ugh, are you kidding me? I'm trying to sleep here. Oh, hang on. I slipped my robe on and cracked open the door, but nobody was there. Enough of this nonsense. Go back to bed. What do you want? But again, there was no one there, just the bellman at the end of the hallway. Did you do this? Do you think this is funny? Are you trying to scare me?
Ma'am, I have no idea what you're talking about. And please keep your voice down. Our guests are trying to sleep.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to sleep as well. Now, finally, get some sleep. Ugh, who puts a chime clock in a bedroom? Seriously? No wonder my sister left this place. That's it. Bellman! The room above me has apparently decided to take dancing lessons up at 2 in the morning. I want you to go up there right now.
That's impossible.
That's impossible? I'll tell you what's impossible is trying to sleep in this godforsaken hotel. Now, I'm not going to ask you again. Please go upstairs and tell them.
Miss, it's impossible. There is no upstairs. This is the top floor.
That's not right. I was just awakened by some sound of someone being dragged across the floor above my room. I want you to check it out. There must be someone in the attic or on the roof or something.
Miss, there is no attic, and the roof is inaccessible. Mr. Baker had the access door welded shut due to safety concerns. He was afraid employees would go up to have a smoke and end up falling to their death. Maybe you just had a bad dream.
A bad dream? Bad dreams don't wake you up from a sound sleep. Well, sometimes they do, but not like this. I know what I heard.
Please, miss. Maybe you just need to go back to bed.
I would have gone downstairs to complain, but at that point I was more tired than I was angry. Instead, I went back to my room and I was out like a light. I'd only been asleep for about an hour or so when I was awakened by the icy touch of a hand with frozen fingers, slowly stroking my bare shoulder. My entire body shuddered, but I couldn't move. I wanted to cry out, but I didn't have the breath. It felt like my heart had stopped beating. The icy fingers ran down my shoulders and then started to caress my long dark hair. I couldn't take it anymore and leapt out of the bed. The room was illuminated by the moonlight, but I could see no one in the bed. I quickly scanned the room again. Again, no one, until there was a dark shadow near the door. It started to move, slowly moving towards me. As it approached, the shadow's outline became more clear. It was a dark shape of a woman. The shape stopped and turned. It held out one finger and started to write on the wall. Letters formed, burning letters made of fire. The shape wrote H, and then an E, L, hell, really? F, I, R, E, hellfire? Then it turned towards me and I saw its eyes, red, glowing, that I will never forget. I let out a scream and then it was gone. The shape, the letters, everything. I crossed the room and lit the oil lamp. There was no one there. I slept no more that night, and when the sun came up, I readied myself for breakfast with Mr. Baker.
Excuse me, Miss Meadows, is it? I'm E.E. Baker. I understand that you've been looking for me. May I join you?
Yes, sir. Yes, please sit down. You see, I've been trying to retrace my sister's steps prior to her disappearance. The police suggested that she might have gotten involved with a gentleman, but that's not Clara. I know that my sister came to this hotel in the hope of meeting with you.
Yes, I met Clara, and I can tell you your sister is a brilliant engineer. She came to pitch me on a new type of boiler, one that she'd invented that requires half the amount of steam and runs on 50% less fuel. I apologize for not replying to her letters, but I received so many letters from crackpots hoping I'll buy their unproven inventions. Your sister was different. She showed me the schematics. Her design is miles ahead of what my team is currently working on.
So what happened? When did you last see her?
She was supposed to meet me for dinner Wednesday night, but she never showed. I asked her to bring along the schematics for a final review. My lawyer was even going to draw up a contract first thing in the morning. She worked way too hard on this to just skip town. I'll be honest with you, Miss Meadows. I fear the worst.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty. It seems like the trail has gone cold here.
I'm sorry I don't have more information for you. If there's anything I can do for you, I'm at your service. Oh, have you tried our German muffins?
Not yet. Just coffee for me. It seems that I had a bit of a rough night.
Well, E.E., you old so-and-so, you're up early. Early bird catches the worm, am I right, old boy? Oh, I beg your pardon. It looks like this early bird has caught him a beautiful birdie.
Apologies, Miss Meadows. These fellows are from the local stag lodge. They hold their meetings here at the hotel once a week. In fact, they're sponsoring tonight's masquerade ball. I do hope you can make it. Maybe it'll help take your mind off things for a few hours. Oh yes, where are my manners? Miss Lucy Meadows, allow me to introduce the man with the largest handlebar mustache in town, Mr. Harold Tremont.
It's a pleasure to meet you, miss.
Hello, I'm the Reverend William Chestnut.
And this is Mr. Lawrence Division.
Hello.
Gentlemen, it's nice to meet you.
Miss Meadows, I hope I'm not out of line by saying this, but we've heard about your sister. Please know that we are praying for her. In fact, that's the reason Division here is a little tongue-tied. He saw you from across the room and thought your sister had returned.
Oh, so you've met Clara?
Well, no, not exactly. It's just that, her picture, it had been shown all around town. So when I saw you, you sure are a dead ringer for her.
Oh, funny expression, dead ringer. Well, you see, in times past, medical science was not nearly as advanced as it is today. It was not unheard of for people to be buried alive due to the inability to determine if the subject was actually dead or not. To ease these fears, the cemetery started installing a metal pipe which ran from the coffin up through the ground into the tombstone. Inside the pipe was a rope with one end inside the coffin and the other end connected to a bell above ground. Should the unfortunate fellow wake up and discover he'd been mistaken for dead, he simply needed to pull the rope and ring the bell. Ring, ring! Time to dig up another one. So you can imagine when people would see someone who resembled the recently deceased, they'd say, "Well, he's a dead ringer for that chap we buried a year ago." Oh my.
That's interesting. Not sure it's helpful in this case, though.
If you'll excuse us, we must be going. There are so many preparations that need taken care of before tonight's big event. Good day to you.
I'm sorry about all that. I like to say they mean well, but sometimes I'm not so sure. They did donate the figures in our statuary garden and back. You must see it sometime. The most recent addition was just put in place last week.
As Baker spoke, I became aware of a dark shadow on the ceiling behind him. The shadow started to move. It crept down, and when it reached the floor, the shape of a woman, in black, stepped out of the wall. I knew that this was the same visitor from my room last night. She moved quickly towards me. Before I could say anything, she looked at me with her glowing red eyes and screeched, "Beware, hellfire!" The shadow rushed through Baker and then through me, knocking me over in my chair. As I started to lose consciousness, I could see her black figure disapparate above me.
Miss Meadows, Lucy, are you all right?
Yeah, I think so. What happened? Did you see that?
I saw your eyes roll back and you fell over in your chair. You must have fainted.
You didn't see her?
See who? Here, drink this.
Good Lord, are you trying to poison me?
I'm sorry, it's just Kewanee tap water, miss. Maybe you should go to your room now to rest.
I took Baker's advice and went back to my room, hoping that this time I could finally get some sleep. When I awoke, I couldn't believe that it was already late afternoon. The sun was getting low in the sky, and I could already see the brilliant oranges, reds, and pinks of the autumn sunset. There was a knock at my door, and I held my breath.
Miss Meadows, I have a delivery for you.
Hello. What is it? I wasn't expecting anything.
It's for tonight, ma'am. For the masquerade. It's a dress.
I'm sorry, I can't accept that. Anyway, who sent it to me?
I don't know, ma'am. When I came back from my break, it was hanging on the luggage cart with a note to deliver it to you. Please take it. It will save me from getting in trouble.
I reluctantly agreed, a bit out of curiosity, but mostly because I did need something to wear for the evening. The dress was beautiful. It was a deep red color, covered in delicate lace with an open neckline. There were a pair of matching red heels and a small mask made of the same red lace. The mask covered my face down to my nose and formed the shape of a skull when tied behind my head. Although I wasn't in the mood for a party, I figured it might be my last chance to solve this mystery. I took the elevator downstairs and made my way to the grand ballroom. I must have made quite the entrance since I was the only one wearing red. Somehow the hotel staff had failed to tell me this was a black tie only affair. Everyone was either in a black suit or a black ball gown, along with a long black cloak and some type of mask. A large group of men were wearing masks I recognized as plague doctors. I remembered reading once that these bird-like shaped masks were designed to protect the doctors from infections like the Black Plague. The long beak was packed with sweet smells such as dried flowers, herbs, and spices to combat the stench of death that surrounded them.
Champagne, ma'am?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. I made my way to a window to enjoy the full harvest moon rising above the trees. It was then that I heard it. A bell ringing. It was unmistakable. I don't know how I could hear it over the sound of the crowd and the band, but I did. It was coming from outside. A chill went down my spine as I remembered Reverend Chestnut's story about people being buried alive. Hey, do you hear that bell?
What's that, ma'am? Oh, yes. I love this band. The guy on the piano is great, but a bell? I don't hear a bell.
No, not in the band. Do you hear a ringing coming from outside?
Sorry, ma'am. I really should get back to work.
My heart racing, I decided to investigate the source of the ringing. I stepped outside, and the sound of the ringing intensified. I couldn't stop thinking about Reverend Chestnut's story. What if there's a cemetery near here? What if somebody has been buried alive? What if someone has done something evil to Clara and this was her signal that she was alive? I followed the bell ringing to the edge of the woods. About 50 yards from the back of the hotel, I reached an old dead oak tree, and the ringing suddenly stopped. I looked around. There was no cemetery, no sign of anyone buried alive. I must have imagined it. Maybe it was the stress and the lack of sleep. But just then, I saw something reflected in the moonlight. Stuck in the bark of the old dead tree, I reached up, felt the cold bronze in my hand, and pulled it out. I immediately recognized it. It was V-shaped, with a hinge in the middle and points on the ends of the arms. These are engineer's calipers, and even in the dim light, I could see the engraving. Property of Clara Meadows. How was this possible? I remembered that this was a gift from our father when Clara graduated from engineering school at the University of Illinois. I didn't know what any of this meant, but I figured it must be important, somehow. Since I didn't want any questions when I went back inside, I hid the calipers inside my corset, making it even more uncomfortable than I even thought possible. I rejoined the party and was relieved to find Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker, thank you for this wonderful dress. I guess you assumed correctly that I hadn't packed my bag with a masquerade in mind.
Good evening, Miss Meadows. You do look smashing, but I'm afraid I can't take credit for the dress. I do hope you're feeling better, though.
I do. Just so many questions and not many answers. It's exhausting.
Why don't you give yourself the night off and clear your head? It is Halloween, after all, here. How about a glass of champagne?
As Baker went to socialize, I sat down with my drink, closed my eyes, and tried to meditate on what to do next. I was startled when I felt the touch of a gloved hand on my bare shoulder and found a strange man in a plague doctor mask standing over me. He handed me an envelope and quickly disappeared into the crowd before I could question him. The note inside read, "All will be revealed. Come to the statuary garden at midnight." I sat alone in the center of the garden, surrounded by 12 white marble statues that circled a great fountain. At the foot of each statue was a lighted jack-o'-lantern, which gave the garden a festive holiday glow. As the orange candlelight danced across the faces of the figures, I became uneasy, waiting for whoever had given me that note. "All will be revealed," the note said. I hope so, because I couldn't take much more of this place. I heard footsteps and rustling in the bushes. A man in a plague doctor mask stepped out of the darkness. I couldn't tell if it was the same person who had given me the note, but I needed to confront him. "You there! What's this all about? You tell me what you know about my sister."
All will be revealed in due time, miss.
I stepped towards him and heard a twig break from my right. 2 more plague doctors stepped out, then 2 more on my left. I spun around and realized they were now surrounding me. 2 of them stepped forward and tried to grab my wrists. I broke away, clenched my fists, and double punched both of them in their groins. As the rest of the circle closed in on me, I panicked, pushed through them, and ran. But in the chaos, I collided with the base of one of the statues, causing it to crash to the ground. I thought the statue would have shattered into a million pieces, but it didn't. It cracked open like an egg, and I could see there was something inside. One of the arms had broken off, but there was another, more lifelike arm in its place. To my horror, I realized that the statue wasn't a statue at all. It was a cocoon encasing a dead body. I stepped forward, afraid of what I was about to see, but I had to look. It was that when I saw her face. My sister, Clara, dead. What kind of monster would do this?
Seize her!
The plague doctors closed in, and my grief and rage became uncontrollable. I broke away from them and ran. As they chased me, I toppled over all of the statues, each time crashing to the ground and cracking open, revealing yet another corpse in varying degrees of decay. In the end, they were finally able to subdue me, and I was dragged off deeper into the woods.
Miss Meadows, it's so nice of you to join us.
I recognize your voice under that mask, Tremont. So this is what your stag lodge does? Capture innocent women and then murder them in the woods?
Oh, Miss Meadows, this is so much more than a stag lodge. Huh. Let me take off my mask so I can address you properly. There. That's much better. Of course, the stag is simply a guise for our true organization, the Hellfire Club.
So, grown-up boys playing pirates in the woods and then murdering women. That's not much better, Tremont.
Since you're new here, let me tell you a little story. Many of the men in this circle are the descendants of pioneers who founded this town. Their families have worked hard and sacrificed to make it what it is today. Unfortunately, folks like Baker are trying to ruin it, bringing in the filthy, the unwashed, and the uneducated to work at his factory. At first, my followers and I banded together over our mutual hate of the outsiders. But now the Hellfire Club has grown into, oh, so much more than that.
So boys creating a cult in the woods and murdering women, just when I thought you couldn't be any more disgusting.
You're right about the cult. You see, that word is derived from the word occult, which is something I became fascinated with around the time we founded our club. There are so many dark and powerful forces surrounding us. I learned that it's possible to tap into them. You just need to commit to what must be done.
What are you talking about, you crazy bastard? You killed my sister. There's nothing you can say that will ever justify that.
Why don't I just show you?
Tremont pulled from his cloak an old tattered scroll, which he unrolled on a flat rock in the center of his circle. He lit a lantern and held it so I could see it. It was a drawing of a man with long, muscular arms, large hands with claws where the nails should be. His legs were like a man at the thighs, but then they went down, became hairy until they came into a cloven foot. The face was wild like an animal with long hair, dark eyes, and a snout that revealed sharp teeth. On top of his head were antlers, like a deer, but the points were sharpened and dripping with what I assumed was blood. So you drew a picture of a big scary monster? That's what this is all about?
No, Miss Meadows. This is not just a picture. This is what your sister and the others died for. And this is why you have to die. Right here on this rock. And by the same dagger that took the lives of the other 12. Tonight, under this All Hallows Eve full moon, your sacrifice will be number 13. The final sacrifice needed to unleash him, to bring forth the Defiler.
Please, Tremont, you're messing with things you can't completely understand or control.
It's you who doesn't understand, Miss Meadows. By your sacrifice, the Defiler will be unleashed.
purging this city of the filthy and purifying it for generations to come. Now, we must prepare her.
2 of his men grabbed me, tied my wrist, and moved me towards the rock. My heart raced as I prepared to die. My only comforting thought was that I'd soon be joining my sister. It was then that it hit me. Tremont, I can accept my fate and understand now that my sacrifice is necessary. But before I die, I just want to know, why did you send me this dress?
It was all part of the plan. You see, I needed to easily identify you in the crowd at the masquerade. And I had a feeling you'd look good in red.
I moved in closer to him. And do you like what you see?
Yes, of course. But there's no time for that now. The Defiler awaits.
Maybe the Defiler can wait just a little longer. Although my wrists were tied, I slid my hands inside my dress, which gained me Tremont's full attention. I then grabbed the calipers from inside of my corset, pulled them out, and with all my might, jammed them right into Tremont's eye.
Ah!
As I took off running, I wriggled my hands loose from the ropes, freeing them to lift the hem of my dress, and I ran, faster than ever before, straight into the darkness. I nearly crashed into several trees, but was able to stay on my feet and just keep going. My life depended on it. As I neared what looked like the top of a steep hill, I heard someone gaining on me. I turned and saw the bloody face of the now one-eyed Tremont, full of fury and determined to see me dead. At the top of the hill, I stumbled and fell to the ground. My ankle was twisted. Tremont stood above me and withdrew his knife.
You did this to me. The others, they didn't deserve to die, but you deserve this, you filthy wench.
Tremont raised the dagger over his head, and as I took what would surely be my last breath, I heard the dagger fall to the ground. Suddenly, Tremont was lifted into the air, his hands clutching at his throat. He struggled for about a minute before his body became lifeless, hanging about 15 feet off the ground. Someone lit a lantern and I could see a figure next to a horse. There was a rope running from the saddle over a tree branch and ending in a lasso around Tremont's neck. The figure stepped out of the darkness and held up the lantern. Enos?
It rhymes with penis.
What? How?
I work for Mr. Baker, ma'am. When he saw you were missing from the masquerade, he became concerned and sent me out to look for you. I'm just so glad I found you before it was too late.
You have no idea. Thank you, Enos. I owe you my life.
Now let's get out of here before the rest of them hornswoggles show up.
I was taken to the hospital for observation. Although I'd narrowly missed death at the hands of a raving lunatic, I didn't have any major injuries. Just some scrapes, bruises, and a twisted ankle. All things that would heal over the next couple of days. My recuperation at the hospital also gave me time to grieve over the loss of Clara. In my heart, I think I already knew she was dead when I got off that train in Kewanee. I just needed to find her, to get closure. After I was discharged, I agreed to meet Mr. Baker for a late lunch before catching the evening train back to Chicago.
Lucy, thank you for meeting me. The last time I saw you, you were sound asleep in your hospital room. I didn't want to disturb you since it's probably the first time you've been able to rest since you got here. I really don't know what to say after all that you've been through.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, but...
Please, my friends call me EE.
Okay, EE. I wanted to ask you, whatever happened to the rest of the Stag Lodge? I hope those scoundrels rot in hell, or at least in jail.
I hate to say that once Tremont met his fate, all of his cronies scattered to the winds. The Stags were disbanded and they were all denied knowing anything about the Hellfire Club. They even went so far as to convince the police that Tremont's death was a suicide.
Are you kidding me? So he gouged his own eye and then he hung himself.
I know. These guys have connections in high places. It seems they even have the public fooled. Folks have started calling the spot where Tremont died Suicide Hill.
But EE, there were bodies.
I know. Unfortunately, I was only able to recover Clara. I took her inside when I went to call the police, but when I returned, they were all gone. Even the remains of the statues. I don't know how they did it so fast, but they seem to be experts at covering their tracks. They pinned Clara's death on Tremont. Said he killed himself because of the guilt and shame he felt over her murder.
At least I can take her back with me to be buried.
Indeed. I've already made the arrangements with Mr. Elihu Rux, the undertaker's man, as well as the folks at the train depot.
There's one more thing I wanted to discuss with you. I found these and Clara's things in the hotel room. I want you to have them.
But these are all the schematics for the boiler she invented. I'd assumed Tremont had gotten a hold of these too. Of course I'll pay you handsomely for these, and you'll never have to worry about your finances again.
I don't care about the money. I just want a part of my sister to live on. In this case, her legacy will be the warmth your boilers give on cold winter nights. But I'll also accept a check. I'm not foolish.
No, Miss Meadows. In fact, you're quite remarkable.
I bid EE goodbye and boarded the train. As we pulled away from the station, I was glad to be on my way home, but also felt a little melancholy. The loss of my sister was devastating, but it was something else. I was thinking about the people I'd met and how this little town had changed my life forever. We headed east down the tracks and I closed my eyes. Then the familiar touch, cold, icy fingers holding my hand. "Hello, Clara," I whispered, as the gentle movement of the train rocked me to sleep.
She goes on to say she mailed this story to Mr. Baker for his book. They apparently kept in touch until his death. He even consulted with her on several of the other weird and strange stories in this book.
Well, Leonard, your story did not disappoint. Thank you for sharing this with my listeners. I had no idea this happened right here in our own backyard, but it doesn't surprise me. Now it has come time to unmask the evil, to shed light on the shadows. The legacy families exist in quiet, evil darkness. The puppets are coming. I haven't much time. The evil is organized by no other than...
Police, open up! Shut it down!
You need to stop now!
They've found me. Seekers of truth, find my notes. Continue my work. Don't let this die with me.
Get down on the ground!
You shot me! I can't believe you shot me!